Right. Good morning, everyone. And after a long time, I'm chairing the proposition from campus. So we used to have it actually on campus for a very long time before we went offline and online and all of that, off campus and online. Today's proposition is by Sobhya Ahsan, who's been a faculty with us since 2016. Uh, Before that, she of course has a bachelor's in architecture from Jamia, and a master's in urban regeneration also from Jamia, and has worked with several government and private organizations. And her research interests include habitat designs, urban regeneration, urban history, and migration studies. So she's been a core member of the proposition team, of course. So a very especially warm welcome to you, Sobhya, for presenting your proposition. And her title is Whose City Is It? Exploring Spatial Inclusivity in the Realm of Migration. So over to you.
Thank you, Radha. Thank you for introducing the topic. And good morning, everybody. So I'll just first share my presentation before I begin. I hope my screen is visible to everybody.
Yes. Thanks, Sobhya.
Okay, so before before moving forward with the presentation, I would first would like to give an introduction, or you can say a background of how I arrived here and what is this, what is the meaning of this title? Whose city is it? What am I referring by this? So we all have different understanding of cities, and cities is in discussion for a very long time, and there, I mean, in terms of the determinants, if we may say, there are multiple urban determinants which defines a city, which gives it a character. But one of the very primary determinants are its people who lives in the city. But when we talk about people, we kind of take into the attributes. For example, we say people from what is the age of these people in terms of demography. We talk about their gender, we talk about their economic status, and this is how we define the people who are inhabiting an urban space, a city. But in this discourse, we somehow tend to forget a very important aspect, which which has been defining cities for a very long time, and which is this realm of migration. This realm of this migration, this concept is not new, and this is one of the reasons why cities got their existence and how settlements came into being. So migration is something that is the center of my whole research also, where I'm trying to read cities and migration together. At certain instances, I am putting urban spaces on the foreground, and I'm trying to understand that from the lens of migration. And in doing so, I will be discussing this over the course of this presentation of how I have arrived to some arguments, or you can say the gaps that exist in the scholarship of migration and urban studies. Uh, to understand this whole concept, it is again very important to first understand what migration is and what migration do to cities and to its, what is the role of migrants, and what is this whole concept of migration around which cities are or cities exist. So migration, again, it's as I already mentioned, it's a fundamental phenomena in human history, and people have been moving, and they've been moving since prehistoric times, and it is the cities that have attracted the majority of migrants. So this is a quote by Ban Ki-moon. He's this Secretary General of United Nations. He said that migration is an expression of human aspiration for dignity, safety, and a better future. So these three aspects are, the core aspirations which we find attached with the idea of migration. And people, whenever they have migrated, in whichever time period, they have migrated majorly because of to find dignity, to find safety, or a better future, be it economic growth, be it a refuge, as refugees, asylum seekers. These three has been the core aspirations behind the process of migration. Now the question arises that, I mean, we are trying to understand migration and we are trying to read migration in cities together, but what is the first thing that comes to our mind when we say, okay, migration happens? So what it does to a city? The first thing, most of us, is the idea or concept of diversity. We say that diversity is in our, I mean, migration happens, so diversity also comes, or vice versa. So these two terms are sometimes taken together and sometimes referred as synonymous to each other. So if you look at this picture on the top, this is of New York subway. So I'm just to put you everybody in a broader perspective, or me or myself. So if you look at this picture, this is New York, and here, of course, this diversity is a result of migration. People moved a lot, and this city itself is a result of people moving in. There are migrants who constitutes the city, but this is again entirely not true, because there are certain countries. Another example is the below picture, which is of New Papua Guinea, where it's a country. It's a very small country, even in population, just 10 million people. But the cultural diversity that we find here, in its the languages that are spoken here, the different communities that exist, native communities. So it is very varied. But this have happened not because of migration, but because of lack of migration, or you can say because they got isolated into their own smaller communities, and they retained their identity there. So in both the cases, in one case we find that diversity is happening because of migration, and whatever identity they are bringing in, they are expressing it, and it is finally resulting in a form of diversity. The other example is where diversity is there but because of isolation. So this is something to be understood, not because I would be looking at diversity and then taking my study forward, but to put a to put migration in a bigger perspective. I found that I thought that this would be my first thread to understand India, because my study is revolving around India only for the time for this time period. So this applies very well with the idea of India, and we understand India through its diversity too, and in both its scale and variety, because India has seen important migration waves, and migration, again, it is not new in India, and it is observed in a variety of cultures. We see diversity in the festivals that are celebrated, the languages that are spoken, or even the food that we eat. It's everywhere. So this diversity that we find, that is existing in cities in the form of all these the mix of these cultures together, and that is why it has resulted into a complex mix of uh, you can say cuisines or festivals, or even for that matter languages. There are certain languages where these overlaps are happening, but does it also is it also happening in the built, is it also happening in the urban spaces at large or not? I mean, so what sort of migration are we witnessing right now is also very important to be understood. So that documentation first, I felt was necessary to put myself into in a situation where I can put an argument to what I was doing. So then I started looking at the global trend of migration. What is happening? Where does India stand with respect to its migration? So we find that with respect to India, there is more immigration that is happening than immigration. Immigration was happening, but presently, if we see the census, of course, for the global migration stock, But we see that there are few countries, neighboring countries, from where people are still immigrating. That is, we have Afghanistan, Nepal, Bangladesh. But overall, people are emigrating because of better job opportunities and for better future. For example, the recipient countries are like America and UAE and many more. So this is one of the points. The next thing is, if we try to further more understand this better, this is a curve that we see. So this I've referred World Bank, and here what they have mapped is that uh, it's a shorter time span from late 1960s to till 2017. What they've mapped it, and they've found that immigration, how the immigration dropped and how immigration now, it's a downward curve, and immigration is higher now. And this, there are, so this gives us clues of why this is happening, and then what sort of migration is India witnessing today? What can we do about it? All these questions were there in my head, but still I had no. I mean, uh, from this study, I was still finding to put myself into that. Finding, I was trying to find my own thread, my own lens, what I would be doing with this information. Another, so this is with respect to the migrants who are coming to India or going out. So this was international migration that I was referring, but there's one another very important migration that we tend to miss out is the internal migration. So overall, there's total migration stock is in India is say somewhere around 400 million or 450 million. Out of that, some 60 million, 56.48 million is the interstate migrant. So this holds a very important stock with respect to migration that is happening within India. And in this, it is also important to mention that this migration, internal migration, is, there are two states which are responsible for the maximum, most number of migrants, and they are again the receiving states, or you can say the cities are again limited. So one is Delhi, then you have Gujarat, Maharashtra. These are the cities which are taking the migrants, and there are a couple of cities who are sending the migrants. So this also cannot be ignored when we are trying to understand Indian migration, and we are trying to understand and read the cities with respect to its people who are on a move. So this is with respect to the available data that is there in terms of numbers. But then the question still remain that what am I mean in terms of space? What happens when a person moves from one place to another, from his or her hometown to a new, I mean, to a destination place where he or she is arriving? What happens then? So this if you look at this picture, this represents people who are in a transition. They have not uh, fixed themselves in a space, but they are on a move, and they have come, or they are arriving at the destination country or a destination city with hopes, with aspirations to find dignity, to find for a better future, basically. So the two images on the left hand side are of partition of 1947, where they were given the initial phase, they were given camps where they inhabited, they stayed for a while, but still their fixation in the urban space was missing, and so was their right to the city. Same is with the Tibetan migrants and the very recent one, the Rohingya refugees. So the point of arrival is when they struggle to find or to bring or to express themselves, to express their identity in the receiving city. So how does it happen? Where do they have any sort of right in the city apart from what government is providing them in the form of say citizenship or in the form of policies? What happens with the production of space? What happens to the right of the city? How well they can express themselves where they are locating themselves? So these are, again, as already mentioned, these were some questions that I was asking to myself, that whose city is it then? People are coming in, they are occupying a space in a city, but can they call that city their city? And how does they get included in the city then? So to understand that better, I started reading this literature, uh, and there was this idea of right to the city that was given by Henry Lefebvre in 1968, where he has criticized the failure to include inhabitants in the production of spaces. And what he says is that the right to form a migrant space are the right to transform and produce urban space, and the right to specialize and display distinctive identities. So if they're able to display their identities, if they're able to produce and transform that space, then they can have some sort of association, and then they can have that right to the city. And not just any space, but there should be a social process. It's a social process. A social production of in a city is what can build inclusion in a city space. This was one of the literature that I went through, and I started then looking at various cases that where the migrants have actually situated themselves over a period of time, and then what is happening in those urban spaces, whether did they produce a space, an urban space, and if they did, how well they did it, were they get included, integrated or not. So moving further ahead, again, I choose Delhi for to understand the spatial dynamics of the migrants. So the first case that I took was refugee settlements during the time of partition of 1947. So these are two images. On the left hand side, you see 1942 map where these refugee settlements did not exist. On the right hand side is where government proposed and developed various settlement colonies for the refugees. So you can see there is Lajpat Nagar coming up, Defense Colony coming up, many more, and similar to that, there were other colonies also like Kirti Nagar, Moti Nagar, West Patel Nagar. All these these were all refugee settlements designed by the government. So this was an act of space production of space from the city's end. But what is important to note here is that when these spaces were developed, this was one thing that was kept in mind was the profile of these spaces of these settlements. And if you closely look at these neighborhood blocks, they are such that you have this open space in the center in the form of, say, parks, in the form of tot lots, and around which there was this built mass surrounding it. So, so it helped to create, or it helped the refugees to bring to express themselves as a form of a community. So it became a community within a community. They started, so that expression of their identity, sense of belonging happened. But what it did was that since these were developed in separate pockets, so they kind of got separated from the rest of the city. So they found there was production of space, the right to the neighborhood was there, right to the city as a whole was there, but there was no exchanges that happened between them and the rest of the city at that point of time. And this is another image which is showing that how, I mean, in that settlement, how inward looking it was, and even after, I mean, how people have expanded over the years, their built structures, the same exist. But interesting thing to note here is that those exchanges were possible on the edges. These intercultural exchanges happened, but they happen on the edges. And here, what is happening is people, not just them as a community, but people from other part of the city, because this is a market street, and you cannot limit anybody using that space. So intentionally, unintentionally, their expression, their identity got intermixed with the rest of the community, rest of the city. There are a few more examples. Again, spatial dynamics with respect to Delhi only. We see Tibetan settlement also in Delhi. Again, it's a closely knit community. Their expression of identity again is happening inside that neighborhood, very well represented the way they're built, the way they are showcasing the architecture, the formation of spaces, all of that. But again, the connection with the rest of the city through their identity, through the expression, is what that needs to be again looked at. We have another recent migrants, which are Afghan migrants, and what the uniqueness about this settlement is that the Afghans who are migrating, they are migrating to this space not because they are finding some a sense of space in that area, but because there are some national networks that already exist in these areas. They know these people already. The people who are here living here in bits and pockets are already the migrants, and other migrants, whoever Afghan migrant is coming, they are finding this a safe place for them, because this is where they can express themselves again, on the streets, on the markets, where the expression is happening through their economic the ways in which uh, they are finding a space in the city. And that is food. Rohingya, to if I mention about Rohingya, so here the issue is that uh, their identity. So here they do not want to express. The issue is that they want to get mixed, and in doing so, they kind of they hide their identity. That okay, we are like you all, and put our if we express our identity, we would look something else. So that distinctive character and identity, they're holding it to themselves. It is getting reflected in some portion, the way the choices of material for low cost housing and things like that. But overall, that is missing for Rohingya. This is as far as the migrants from outside are concerned. But again, referring to the internal, the trend that we see, internal migration, what is happening there? This we all are familiar with this image, which is placed in the center of the slide. This is during the time of lockdown in this pandemic, where people, these internal migrants who are majorly laborers, they 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 went back to their hometowns because there was no inclination for them to fix. There are a couple of reasons, of course, that because of their economic status, they could not, because they are not living with their family, so their association with their host city was minimal, and that expression is evident in their hometown. So this another illustration that is on the right hand side, it's a cartoon drawn by R.K. Lakshman, which says common man goes to the village. So whatever is happening in his village, because the inclination to fix themselves in the host city is not there. So at least for the matter of residential spaces, it is not there. But again, if at all there is some sort of production of space that is happening from the perspective of internal migrants, where is it? It's not that does it is not happening at all. It is happening, but where it is limited, you can say, to religious festivals. Their cultural aspirations are getting its manifestation in religious festivals, which we see in Chhat Puja celebrations. So, if so, we find that over the years, the number of Chhat Puja ghats have also increased in Delhi, and that is also one of the reasons that the amount of migrants that Delhi is receiving, internal migrants that Delhi is receiving from these two states of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, has made it a necessity for again, it's a political move, but yes, it is finding an expression in urban space. So from this body of, you can say, literature or whatever exists, I jotted down two arguments which I would be taking forward. One is that sense of a space in an urban area, does it act as a tool of integration of the migrants in the city, which means that translation of their memories, their culture in the urban space? And if it does it also bring inclusion? Or is it challenged by the fixed cultural boundaries? That so sense of space is bringing them closer to the city, but it is getting challenged by their culture. So they are expressing their identity, but it is being challenged by their fixed cultural boundaries, and there's no intercultural exchanges that are possible. And does it leading to less of an inclusion in the city? So my challenge here was again to then find a mechanism, or you can say a methodology of now what, how do I go about it further. So to find an answer to questions, there could be various ways, but I resorted to the first step that I took was to understand, to find clues from what already exists in the form of history, in the form of history of Indian migration. What have happened in India over the ages in different phases, and can I get some clues of production of space of intercultural exchanges if it has happened in the history of Indian migration. So this is a timeline which gives an overview of Indian migration and how many phases it happened. This I was able to come up with this from, there was a book that I was reading, India Moving, and from there I was able to uh, draw this timeline. So what is happening here is we see that till 500 BCE, we are still trying to understand the sort of migration. There are debates about Aryan migration. There are debates about Dravidians and about the skin color and restricted geography because of which Indians got their identity. All of that is happening, but the literature with regard to this is limited, and it is now being discovered more with respect to the genetics. But what the next phase is where I could find some more clues, which is during the time for 500 BC to 1300 CE, there's this ancient migration phase. And this time, what was happening was all kind of migrations were happening in India. There was in migration from Central Asia, out migration from again West and East, and there was within migration also. So this idea of internal migration again is not new, and this in and out migration was happening because there was already existing ancient trade route, and all the coasts were responsible for the kind of commercial activities or the trade that was happening because of this ancient trade route. That so maritime trade was also prevalent at that time. But what is important to understand from this ancient migration is that uh, ordinary people did travel, and they traveled considerably for personal reasons, but overall migration was controlled. And it is even mentioned in Arthashastra that certain privileges were given to certain people, for example, to Brahmins, uh, and otherwise it was controlled. There was migration of Brahmanas that was seen a lot during this time too. Another important point to note from ancient migration is that migration was, there was a notion of impurity that was attached. So it was never considered a very good thing to to migrate from one place to another, because there was a notion that one person would bring in new culture, or there would be some sort of, they'll bring new ideas, different ideas. So there was these terms Yavanas and Melchas that was uh, denoted to them as outsiders who are coming from the West, foreigners who are coming from the West. Moving forward, we have this time period from 13th to 18th century where we see medieval migration, and here the term changed from Yavnas to Firangis, where this is coming from again Persian, where people were entering into India, and they were finding refuge here. They were fleeing Mongol invasions, and this was a time when the roads and seas were more permanently, they were integrated. There were three kinds of migration that were prevalent during medieval migration, which was complex military, commercial, and religious networks. Because again, maritime trade, these coasts were well integrated, so there was a lot of trade that was happening, a lot of commercial activities that were happening. But this is a time when there was a lot of religious networks that found their hold in India. And one of the important ones, which we presently also we find uh, those you can say, I mean, how they fixated themselves, how their movement got fixed in space, is the Sufi network, where they acted as mediators, and the new community that emerged in India, it was not a secluded sort of a landscape, but it was like an overlay on already existing urban or rural landscape. So this is an interesting aspect of medieval migration, where religious networks played a very important role in these intercultural exchanges. Then again, modern migration, we all know about Britishers coming in, colonization, and railways, and how the speed of migration increased. But the clue that I got from here is again that there was no inclination to fix themselves in this land. And this is again, like I would read this quote by Ghulam Hussain Khan. He says that English have besides a custom of coming for a number of years and then going away to pay a visit to their native country without any of them showing any inclination to fix himself in this land. So migration also depends, and production of space and expression of identity also depends upon your inclination to fix yourself and for how long you are going to fix yourself. That is missing. The right to the city or expression of your identity also kind of gets diluted. And then the next phase is 19th century onwards, which we are presently also witnessing, where there all kinds of migrations that are happening. There's forced migration, voluntary streams are also there, permanent season. All of this is happening presently. So this was one of the steps that I took to draw some clues, and from here I got to understand the notion of migration, how it was referred to, and why it also led to this resistance of not showcasing your identity to some extent. The other were different religious networks that were emerging and how they were trying to fixate themselves in space. I have this particular image of this is not from India, but this case is very similar to Indian case. Why this is important to mention here is because it also resulted in, I mean, we can find some clues of this intercultural exchanges happening in the built environment. So this is an early modern Venice during 16th century. It was one of the largest cities, was culturally diverse. It was one of the trading centers because of which there was migration happening here. There were pilgrims who were coming in, there were traders who were coming in and out. But it was government was controlling and monitoring people's flow because there was this growth of population. There was this fear that there will be an explosion in population because of migrants coming in. So they were encouraging traders, they were encouraging laborers, but they were discouraging ideas, dangerous ideas, or maybe diseases which these migrants can bring in. So what they did was they segregated the migrants. They limited their contact with the rest of the city, and there were these German merchants who were Jews and Muslim merchants who were kept in separate areas away from the main city, and so to control it, to limit it, to limit the interaction. But that was not possible on the streets where trade was happening, where people were mixing, and that couldn't be avoided on the streets. And it is evident also in this image also how these exchanges were made possible on the street, though not in the build, not in the residential, but in the build. So that expression was happening, expression of their identity, their right to the city was happening on, or you can say the mixing was happening in a space which was more public in nature. So this is an old example. To put another example, which is more contemporary in nature, and how migrants presently are trying to showcase themselves or mark their presence, is one of another case, which is in Doha, Qatar, and this is in Malik Street. And what is happening here is that migrants in the city, they are dispersed across the city, and so what they have done, they have devised their own meeting place here. And this space is an empty car park which is close to a bus station, so it is people can easily access this uh, place on Fridays especially. So they are reusing this urban space, and this is, I mean, it's like a calculated choice on the part of the migrants, and their desire to create a social space, but on their own terms. So the creation of a place is happening, and an expression of their identity is happening here. There's no role as such of the government, but the production is happening from their own end, and they are expressing themselves. They are selling things here. So economic they're getting economic benefits. At the same time, there is intermixing of cultures also that is happening here. So these are certain examples just to understand. I mean, uh, how people themselves create space, how the space gets produced, and how these exchanges happens in built environment. So moving further ahead, what would I be doing? I'm still in the process, and I have not situated myself with any particular migrant group or any particular thread, be it religious or commercial. But my idea is to understand this whole notion of production of space by migrants and what it does with respect to placement. So to understand cities better, basically. So there are two propositions. That one is by John Friedman. This is on placemaking. It has nothing to do with the migrants' production of space, but again, this is helping me to understand production of space from migrants' point of view too. So these five propositions, which says social process characterized by contestation, habitation of material space leads to patterns of everyday life centered on places of encounter. Places are impermanent and undergo changes over time. So this is again something where a lot of questions can emerge from this. That if a place is impermanent, then how can one create their own sense of space in that place, or does it also keeps changing over time or not? Then rituals of everyday life offer a sense of security and stability. So I hopefully would be testing all these propositions on my uh, 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 I mean, whichever thread I would be taking from here. The other one is about inclusive public space, and this is by Mayor Sinatsky. It's talking about what is required for a public space to be inclusive. Again, these are generalized propositions, but I would be testing this on migrant production of spaces to find, does this idea of expression and right to the city comes when intercultural exchanges happens, or can this happen in isolation too? So this creation of places with the capacity to express their identity, where does it stand? So that this concept or notion of migration, which is right now like a vicious cycle, I could bring a virtuousness to this cycle. uh, yeah, so it's an ongoing thing. I still need to situate myself with the various examples that I have taken. I have to take a thread, uh, and yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sobhya. I've told you I found your topic to be really fascinating, and awesome. I'd like to open it up for questions now. But if anyone would like to either ask a question or make suggestions for furthering her research, narrowing it down.
Yeah.
Hi, Sobhya. Very interesting presentation. So, just one quick thought that came to my mind, because you started very well with the concept of how migration and isolation makes the diversity in people, and how it is all related to whatever proposition that you've shown us is related to Indian concepts. So what came to my mind is more of seeing the tribe from Papua New Guinea. I immediately got connected to Sentinelese that we have on the North Sentinel, if you know of the Sentinel Island and one of the islands in Andaman. So they are really, really known to be very, very isolated and maintaining the individuality. So those are the, I mean, to begin with, I think since the proposition was more in the Indian context, I think the example could start with the Indian context as well, because we have that variety here and we have that diversity in terms of two extremes. When we have cultural diversity in the metros of Delhi and Bangalore, and vis-a-vis the Sentinel Islands or the tribes that we have on these. So yeah, that was one thing that came to my mind.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, rather than looking at New York and Papua New Guinea and then looking at Majnu Ka Tila. So so just
Yeah.
a suggestion.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Imani.
Most welcome. Thank you. But otherwise, it was really interesting and intriguing.
Yeah, but I'm still trying to find my path. Trying to situate myself. This is where I would like to have all of your suggestions where I can situate. Should I be situating myself with a migrant group? Should I be situating myself with the networks that I was talking about, be it religious network or be it commercial networks? Because right now I did not want, when I was searching about it, to fix myself or to take up one thread, because whichever thread I was picking, I was finding something very interesting and fascinating about each threads that I was picking. So that's why I put all those threads in place, so that from there, either I would be combining them or I would be just taking one and narrowing down my lens and then moving forward ahead. So
This is the bane of the researcher, no? And especially of a PhD, to narrow it down. But could we, any other questions for Sobia? Piyush, yeah.
Yeah. So, hi Sobia, it's a very uh, interesting presentation and lots of avenues that one can actually, look into in this migration as a theme. Just one thing you just said about commercial network and migration or religious network and migration thing. I just recently came across certain places where it's been described, written as a religious sort of migration, but then when I started studying in detail, it was actually commercial. It was sort of given a name of हम इसलिए कर रहे हैं, इसलिए जा रहे हैं. But then the purpose. So we have to also see those like what they say is not the thing actually. Sometimes what we read, they're also not right. What exactly happened and why that happened. So yeah, that's one thing I wanted to add. And also what Dr. Himani said also very interesting, because I'm really fascinated with this North Sentinel Island. I mean, I personally zoom into their Google Earth image, whenever I get time, and I try to see if I can see one house or anything. But of course, I have not been successful, because since 1970s, I think it's illegal to even talk about it in a way. But yeah, I mean, in India we have so many varieties. I mean, X, Y, Z,
of
A
course,
to Z. I don't know. So yeah, I mean, we have all these varieties are there to explore and get ideas and get understandings, and then apply it in one place to know the place and know what happened and how. What you're saying is the production of spaces, be it public, be it residential, be it religious. Again, typologies comes into picture. So I think it's very it will be interesting, and it will be complex, but at the same time it will be interesting to deal with, I think.
okay. Thank you, Piyush.
Hi, Sobia.
Hi, Prabha.
Hi, very, very nicely done initial research. I should positively say that. I have a thought that you might want to consider. Your broad topic is migrants and social inclusion. So, do you somewhere at any point want to look at the economic aspects, as in of the migrant groups or their support groups to the places where they are migrating? Does the economic condition, the economic status of these groups help in faster or quicker inclusion in the places where they are migrating to? Because I think at the end of the day, whatever may be the reason for migrating at the outset, whether it is political or religious, and in some cases economic, the underlying factor for settling in a particular place is always economic. I think that helps in settling and fixing to a particular place much faster. So maybe you want to look at that at some
So,
point.
I did not start reading about it or did not consider that. Thing is, there's so much already existing literature on migration and its connection with the economics. So much that is, and we cannot ignore it too. I mean, that is an inherent part of a person who's migrating. But that that is where I started thinking about what this idea of production of space, because whatever the body of scholarship that is available, it is more or less talking about economics. So wherever I was trying to read about migration, I was finding economic aspect inherently built into all these discussions. So of course, I don't think I would be taking that as a separate thing. It has to be a part of the study. Uh, uh, but my challenge was again that most of the literature that is available is actually on economics, migration, and even if cities are focused, then also it's the economic that is playing the primary role. So to
So
keep that at the
my
same
point
time,
is not that you solely look at the economic aspects, but I would suggest that don't ignore that also.
yeah,
Give it substantial amount of coverage so that at any point of time you are not asked that or pointed out that you have not looked at this important aspect of migration, because that is one of the key determinants.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry.
Can I? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just Sobhya, I was just wondering that, while you've situated the study geographically in the Delhi region, and you've looked at the timeline and the kinds of migrations that we've seen in Delhi. So now, just like the concepts of invention of tradition, that, there is also this idea of, when we look at the idea of difficult heritage, there is this whole aspect of how time plays a very important role, like how many decades have passed, and the memories become erased, and it finally, after how many generations, does something again become positively viewed by something, with respect to heritage, for example. So the difficult memories go away. So similarly, in terms of migration, and similar, as I was saying, in terms of invention of tradition, that how, when is something a tradition, like how old is a tradition when you call it as a tradition. So similarly for migration also, and this kind of spatial inclusivity that we're talking about. So there is, I'm sure there's going to be a very diverse kind of repercussion of whether the migration happened 50 years ago or 70 years ago or 20 years ago. So is again that something, that temporality, going to be one of your parameters of study? I'm just wondering, because I assume that would be playing a significant role.
I think too. I think time, space and time together, I think I would be reading it. Presently, I haven't, because of me. I was having this fear that if I pick one, I might exclude others. So of course, when I will be looking into more details of a particular case, and then I will be looking at the aspect of time and space. I think that again cannot be. So there are so many things that are associated with migration, and that is one of the reasons why I'm unable to fix myself or situate myself. That is the struggle that I'm having
Right.
from the very
I
beginning.
think I would think that maybe, the concerns of migration that are most dominant, from your, and which are proving to be having research gaps, would probably define your uh, whether it's a temporal positioning, or a geographical positioning, or a phenomenon, I mean, based on some kind of a phenomenon. You would probably be able to define that once the criticality of the concern becomes highlighted, maybe as you move forward, I suppose, because I think trying to address everything is never ever possible in any case. So it has to be something that's the most critical and most exciting also, I think, in terms of the spatial dimension, as well as the time dimension, as well as the, so something will have to guide as you move forward in terms of the existing gap, and also the most exciting for architects and for people who are studying the urban realm. So that's I think all that I can say for now, but great. Yeah, sounds exciting. All the best.
Hi, Sobhya. Ekta here. Sorry, my throat's not so good. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
Being a landscape architect, I have to talk about a tree as a metaphor. So I missed the term rootedness in your presentation. Somehow I was looking for that. And so if you look at a tree as a metaphor, as in rootedness under the soil, and a chhatra chhaya kind of overhead canopy for being that overarching shelter. So I just thought I'll pitch in and say this, just that. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. I'll try to, bring this also.
Can I just quickly 1 minute add to what Ekta has just said? Because that is one thing which is really close to personally to my heart as well. You know, when you talk to these people, how much is the psychological association or emotional association they have to the city that they migrate? There's so much of resource mobilization that happens in terms of income generation, sending money home, or things like that. But when you talk to them, they'll say, "Ghar to hamara idhar hai." So, you know, they don't feel socially connected. They don't feel socially responsible for the place that they inhabit for 10 years, 20 years, because every time it's about giving back, it is moving to the place that they belong to or they belong from. So I think that's so. Are you going to also somewhere down the line talk about the
Yeah, I did. I think I did talk about that,
yes
where I was talking
in
about
yeah
internal migrants, that the inclination to fix themselves, if that is missing,
yeah
then also the
and
production of space is also missing.
yeah so
So I
that
was trying to
association.
explore that aspect, yeah.
Hmm.
Just one more silly question, I would say, but when do we stop becoming migrants? I mean, do we know that? I mean, am I a migrant into Gurgaon, and I will remain a migrant into Gurgaon? And I don't know. I mean, so when does one stop becoming a migrant? And I mean, do we have that quote unquote kind of
The
bracket?
moment we start, maybe, that's where, this is where I'm trying to find, is it time? Because even though a person has spent many years, still that if the expression is not happening, those
Even I
extended,
was
yeah, continue. Yeah, Piyush, you're saying?
sorry to interrupt. I was thinking the same question, Parul. Like I'm a migrant to Gurgaon, and I don't know when I'll be the non-migrant. Also, one thing it just came to my mind to share the places like Dharmsala, then McLeodganj Dharmsala, and then Darjeeling, all those Tibetan when they moved. So there's this study where it was found that the first generation, when in 60s they came, when right now they're in their whatever age, when we talk to them, they still relate to the Lhasa and all those Tibetan places. Like that's our place and this is how we do and all that. But the next generation who are born in those places, and they have not seen their memories only through their elderly. This is how our houses were. This is how the palace was. This is how we ate and this is how we lived. So there is a pattern also. I don't know how to put it, but so what we're just discussing that how the belongingness, the rootedness also that we discussed, that's also changing. The perception
Over
of
time.
being also changing over time, and what changes that, how it changes. I mean, lots of things to do for you, but I just thought of this Tibetan movement was a good example to explore also because they went to south also, Darjeeling and McLeodganj, the places they moved
It's
and
true,
how
I
they,
think, for with respect to Indian internal migrants too.
yeah.
So I'm again an example of the same. So I call myself a Delhiite, but my parents don't call themselves a Delhiite. So that's where your example is also
Hmm.
coming into place. Yeah. So this time factor
So
of
we are,
time.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, please.
No, I can chat with you another time. I have two other thoughts, but we can do that another. I don't want to take away time.
Sure, ma'am.
Can I come in quickly?
Yeah, please, Vibhuti.
Maybe after Mark. Mark's been trying to say.
Oh, no, I was just trying to say that we all immigrants and almost, I think being a migrant is a state of mind or a permanent situation with a large part of the population that we're always going to be, temporarily rooted at a place, but we're always ready to move on also. And that's part of, I think it's very much a part of modern life now. That it's really a state of mind.
Yeah, I think that's
you know,
really relevant. Yeah, true.
Thank you, sir.
Vibhuti, would you like to?
Yeah, thanks, Raja. I think first let me congratulate Sobhya on opening a really timely and topic, because this is something that has not been addressed, researched into, especially within the architectural realm. The impermanent qualities of movement. It's not something that architects or architecture wants to confront even, because we believe in like these permanent buildings which last forever. So that in that regard, I think it's a very, very valuable intervention and thought process. I would actually I would watch this space with interest, your journey with interest, because. But I would also guard you against distractions. You started with the idea of migration, and the root is, it's a Latin root, which means to move or shift, simply. So when does that verb get into a stamp of an immigrant? You see, so that is the problem. That movement and shifting is actually culturally very intrinsic to lots of communities. And as we were chatting the other day, that especially in Islam, the idea of moving is embedded within your identity. That in fact, if you're not moving, there's something almost wrong with you. Why won't you move? And the idea of travel, and the idea of connecting to a place which is the center of the world is Mecca, and I'm taking Islam because it has given rise to such fascinating cultural production as a result of the ability to move and assimilate within it, the cultural threads of the place you settle in for a while. Mughal architecture would not happen if the idea of migration was not embedded in Islam, and Mughal, and so I think the other thing that would so the cultural ideas are very important. I think that would also deflate the political burden that the word immigrant carries with it. And the fact that it could be, although you do say dignity, safety, and better future, but I think within there will be much more enriching ways of describing these journeys within the culture, within various cultures, I think. And also, I think you could also look at people whose identity is in movement, like the gypsies, like who do not want to, who never settle, and who move with seasons, who move with landscape, who move with the river, who move, and that is their identity. So what is in it for themselves, for them to kind of do that? The other thing that you will have to, I think, engage with is the diaspora. It's a very, very populated field, as in scholarship, that lots and lots of scholars working on diaspora. It's not really immigrant, but people who then settle, in the community and then have their own culture. And it is very interesting because, as Piyush also mentioned, the Tibetans, I happened to come across a Tibetan community. We were working with Tapasya knows this, and we had a meeting with them in the campus, and they see the world completely differently. They will see the color yellow as something which is there, you know. And he said, I mean, this person was Tibetan, and we had some yellow vase or something in the office, and D Block, and he said, you know, that yellow is our contribution. I never saw that as Tibetan, but he did.
Yeah.
So it's like you go through world with this these you know, spectacles, virtual reality specs almost, and you see and you find, you locate things that align with your identity, and you see them in a very amplified way. So that your whole perception of the world is very different because of.
And how to break that notion of which is impurity or they not belonging, to how to break it, and rather than thinking about immigrants, just thinking about people on a move.
I think rather than worry with you know, with the negativity that it produces, or the hierarchy, or the power struggles that it produces, I think first you need to kind of engage with you know, the cultural notions of why people move, and what are these journeys, and how do they settle, and how do they look at the world, and so I think that might be very enriching for you as well. And then you see those power struggles from within those lenses, because not everything is economic, not everything is because of money. It is a strong motor in people's lives, but not everything is because of money, and it is very easy to reduce everything to you know, better job, better pay, that's why you move. It's not true. There are other things at play which need to be brought into the foreground, I feel. Also, I think what Paro also raised, you know, the idea of the authentic resident, you know, therefore is also needs to be addressed. So obviously, I mean, what, you know, everybody is also saying that, then who is the original resident? Everybody is a migrant, and that in those ideas you will find answers to philosophically from within a culture. What is it to move? What is the original resident, and what's the journey? And if you see life as a journey, then the idea of movement is embedded in how you see life. And whether owning property, owning you know, a piece of land, then you know, restricts your movement, and what are those, you know, power and economic things at play. So I think those are my okay.
Thank you.
I think the best part of migrations and immigrations is the flow of ideas and values across. And our world is what it is because of this constant movement of people. And maybe you could, if you want to focus on something, maybe you could track a value or a particular set of values which moved through immigration and made a significant change.
I was something on those lines, like what Mark mentions, adding to what Professor Bhuti was just saying, that there was, again, this point of recognizing something as what we are contributing. And the same gentleman pointed out the statue of a Buddha in the room and said that this is again, you know, the iconography is coming from what we brought with us. And if you remember, Sobia, when we went to Sonada, and this old gentleman who was showing us around that craft institute where they produce things, said they came with 200 knowledge of 200 crafts, and they hardly practice 8 or 9 these days, because the further generations, like how Piyush mentioned, do not identify themselves with this, and it's not their aspiration. So you have this variety of scale. If you want to look at placemaking, does these values that they bring with them play any role in that placemaking? So then that can give you close to whether the place is a hybrid, is a pure this or that, because even I mean, if you restrict yourself to one community and study this, maybe it will become more focused, and you can bring out some nuances of their cultural specificity. Like when we studied the Tibetan settlements in different places, we found certain commonalities. Like why do they want to hold on to their refugee status, and what is this, ideal Lhasa reimagination, or if they want to call something their own. So I would say you have this variety of scale, and you probably are already looking at various other lenses. But if you see only the value systems, the cultural or social value systems, then you might find the finer clues of that placemaking that you would like to finally document, and maybe that is something that not many people are focusing on. I'm not very aware of the theorists around this idea, so maybe you could look in that direction. This is the same thought that I was it was going through my mind while you were presenting, whether the scale is something that you might want to consider. Do you want to look at that urban level thing? Do you want to look at the personal level thing, or within the culture also, that personal passing on of those ideas? Does it stop at some point? So yeah, it's
All these
Rajan, some comments in the chat. Is that Professor Vasavara's comment, or maybe it's an unknown sender?
Radha, you're on mute.
Yeah, there is a comment. I think a sense of space is surrounded by a sense of belonging. Do I belong here? This is why in Delhi there are pockets where cultural identity is created, because people unite and find belonging amongst each other, and hence reflection on space. That should be looked into. We don't know who the person is.
So was me.
Yeah.
And then Tapasya, she's referring to Rudovsky's Architecture Without Architects as a relevant collection of ideas and thoughts. And just a thought. And Ekta is saying we're all migrants, which is a Sufi saying. And the shunning of the melting pot ideology. I guess she'll discuss this with you further. Professor Vasavara has a comment. Is this the unknown sender? Is that Professor Vasavara, perhaps? Not
No,
sure.
I won't be unknown.
Yeah, hopefully not. It's
Yeah.
coming up as unknown sender. I have no idea who.
No, because
Professor, would you like to?
if I have comments, I would be very well known, Well, I mean, it's a very complex subject. And, I must compliment you to take it up. But, I am a little bit trying to clarify myself from your title, which says, whose city is it? Now, I believe this is a polemic. And then you say, exploring a realm of migration. Now, I'm a little bit getting confused here, because migration is a kind of human condition, or maybe a phenomena, which is affecting universally. But if the city gets affected, it is because of the immigrants. So would you try to agree with me if I say that spatial inclusivity in the realm of immigrants, because then you're becoming specific about the immigrants and their own realms, within the city. So to me, this is something,
No,
where I need a little bit of clarification.
when so
Because
you're right.
then one can, sort of gradually get into a discussion.
I did not start with this idea of realm of immigration. I started with the idea of migration, and over the time through this process, I think you're right that rather than talking about this, or I should be then not talking about realm of migration and special inclusivity.
No,
in that.
migration happens. Only because of migrations, immigrants come in picture, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm not against the whole idea of migration, or I'm not confused about that as a term. But I'm just trying to understand your inquiries from your title. Because your title is something, you know, which actually, you know, resonates what you intend to do.
Yeah.
So from that sense, I am just trying to clarify myself, you see.
Yeah.
Because many times confusions really occur if your terms are not really clear. The other thing I would like to say is that when you're dealing with this kind of a topic, for example, I have really, if you ask me to talk about this issue of inclusivity of immigrants in Ahmedabad, I can talk to you for hours. Because, you know, who are the immigrants? For example, when you were talking about time, for example, you were saying space and time. So if I look at the scenario of early 20th century, you know, Western Ahmedabad, that is the west side of the river, was conglomeration of villages spread at, say, every 3 or 4 kilometers. And these were very rich villages, you see, with people living in it. But then the old city nobility started moving towards the west for better life, you know. And then they started, you know, commanding areas between these villages, and they settled themselves. So now, in my view, they were actually the immigrants between these villages. And they defined, you know, their own areas, you know, which ultimately became the city. So I'm just trying to imagine, you know, and then you were saying that you are actually focusing on Delhi. Now, Delhi is also, I mean, you may know better, you know, than I know Delhi, but I think I have at least studied, you know, the city at least up to a certain level. Delhi itself, now would you call the British as the immigrants to Delhi? And then the area which is today in a great discussion, Central Vista, for example, is it inclusive to the city, which was existing then? So there are levels of, you know, immigrants, you know, which really matter to a city, you know. I mean, there are large categories of immigrants, you know, and they actually sort of act over a city, and then they establish their own realms, you know.
Yeah.
And these realms are something, you know, which ultimately becomes an aggregated city. But each one of these having their own character. For example, Pumpuhar colony in Delhi, if you see, it's a pure result of immigrants, you see, from Kashmir. Now look at the way they are articulating themselves. You know, so in terms of clarifying these ideas, you see, I think you need to be very clear about it. And I think the subject is so vast, which you must have seen from the discussion here, you know, from various, you know, participants, that it is like catching an elephant, you know, by 5 blind men, you know. And they describe that, you know. So I think you will have to be somebody with a vision. And you will have to really define your subject very well, starting from your titles, and then be very specific about this. Because I think in order to understand and explain the polemic that you're trying to develop, I think you will have to be really very specific. I mean, this is just my observation.
Sir, you rightly said what you mentioned about Ahmedabad and how certain pockets develop because of these immigrants, and they have their own specific identity, and that is showcased in their own kind of niches, if you may say that. So this is something that I also brought into my proposition, that whether we call it an integration in the city or not, whether they are creating their own cities in a way, where is
No,
that
that will also
exchange happening?
depend. No,
Yeah.
that will also depend on what exactly you mean by integration.
Yeah. So
You
of
see,
course.
because look, when Ahmedabad developed on the west side, the community shifted, you know, and they had their own, what was known as societies, you know. And these societies are existent even today with the same kind of generations of, you know, earlier immigrants, you know. So the character never loses. You see, for example, here, if you see the Jains, you know, which is religiously bound community, you know, they have shifted to western areas of the city. And if you go into their areas, you still find the same community bondage which existed in the old city, even in the new environment, you know. So this is something, you know, which they hold on to. So I think it will have a social dimension, it will have an economic dimension to explain, and it will have something, you know, which actually, you know, gets into a kind of, you know, dialogue with the other parts of the city. So that is where, you know, your talk about integration and other things, you know, will come. So there is something, you know, which is really seen as a city. Ahmedabad has been, you know, when it was founded, for example, that was a city of immigrants in 15th century. Everybody came from outside. It was a new city. But it had a tremendous character of this community living. And there was also a kind of bonding character of infrastructure of the city, you know, which actually made it homogeneous. So at what level these issues come up, this is something, you know, which you will have to really find out, you know, as an architect. So this is something, you know, which then will become a very specific study, you know, wherein you can actually demonstrate what are the qualities and what are the factors, you know, which they hold on to and what changes. Now there was a question of about the sense of immigrants, you know. When do you become rooted? Now, in my view, this is something, you know, which only happens in the next generation. You know, when a generation is born in a particular place, that's where they really hold their roots. So this is something, you know, which also is very interesting. I mean, this is a huge subject, you know. I mean, one can just go on discussing about this. But I think it is very important to hold on to something, you know, which can really lead you further, you know, rather than talking on a very broad, you know, global view and then coming down to Delhi. I think you will have to go the other way. You know, you start your understandings from where you are, and then you sort of open up, you know, yourself to understand the global phenomena, you know, because only that is something, you know, which will lead you. This is what I can say.
Thank you so much, sir.
And thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation and giving me an opportunity to share. Thank you.
I'll surely look into it.
Thank you, Professor Vasavra. That was so many thoughts there. And would there be any other where Sobhya, you've really held stage for over an hour and a half. I think it's a topic that obviously resonates with a lot of people at so many levels. We all know phenomena. And you know, have been touched by it, or we've felt it palpably in our own lives in one way or the other. So if there's any other question, I don't want to abruptly close it, but we are running out of time. We have out of time. Sachin says it's a multidisciplinary topic and needs philosophical clarity on notions of identity. Who are we? How do we define it? How do we define ourselves, I guess? How do we define identity? A theoretical grounding on ideas of identity is required. So that's also valid, I think, very valid. Right. Okay, I'm going to take that as no more comments. So thank you, Sobhya, and thank you everyone for your very enthusiastic participation And thank you, Professor Vasavra, for as you know, your sharing and
Thank you very much.
and thank you, Vibhuti, and thanks again to the entire proposition team. See you in 2 weeks. We have another proposition. I think this time it's Sania Siddiq, who's going to be presenting. We'll have her topic shared with you as usual on mail or WhatsApp. All right. Have a wonderful day, weekend. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Shobha.